Hey, what's up? My name is JM Jaley and welcome to my channel. This week I want to talk about the sagging middle. Yeah, it's not a happy topic. I'm sorry. The reason I want to talk about it is because I kind of hit that problem myself recently. And I did a video on imposter syndrome, and this kind of fed into one another, right? It wasn't really imposter syndrome that I was dealing with in a traditional sense. It was more like analysis paralysis, but the result was still the same. I wasn't writing, and I was just slogging through these middle chapters. And I needed a way to get out of it, and I needed a way so that the schlumpiness that I was feeling, in my heart didn't wind up on the page, because you never want that. So after coming through this, I wanted to share with you what I did to not just get through it, but some tips on making sure that the sagging middle that you're writing doesn't translate to the pages that someone will inevitably read. So we're all familiar with sagging middle, right? You hit the middle of the book and things just sort of slow down. You have this wonderful first act where everything's being set up and introduced and you're getting into it. You get all the hooks, right? The author's, this is when he or she is trying to sell you the premise of the book, the promise of the book, right? All the things that the book is supposed to be about are introduced and teased in the first act. The second act is kind of this rising action where the stakes increase, right? And you're starting now to look forward towards the third act where everything's going to come to a head and resolve the big climax, right? But there's this little middle piece that connects the rising action with the third act, the lead in to the third act. That's kind of the danger zone, right? Because you've got all these great beats that are just chock full of interesting things, excitement, what have you, and then you kind of have to bridge these two acts together. And sometimes you hit this rut, and that's kind of what happened to me. So here's the thing, when it's boring to write, it's going to be boring to read. So you don't want that. So what I was doing was sort of writing in fits and starts. I would get kind of pumped up about what I was writing, and I would write some more, and then when I started to lose steam, I stopped writing. So I'd only do, 100 words, 200 words maybe, which isn't bad, no shame in that, but it was certainly a dip to what I would typically write in a day when I was kind of on fire, when I was feeling it, And so my writing slowed way down, and it was taking me weeks and weeks just to get like one chapter done. The other thing I was doing that was helping was rereading what I had previously wrote, because that would help me get the flow and lead back into things. This is a good tip for writer's block too. If you're stuck, reread what you'd written, and it kind of puts you back in the zone, back in that mood, back in that headspace, back in the voice of your character, and you can kind of delve back in. You're not coming at it cold, sitting down, having never looked at your manuscript in the last 2 weeks, and just dive back in cold. Warm yourself back up and get back into it. And that was helpful. But again, I kept losing steam because this material wasn't as sexy as the previous content that I'd written in the other acts and the other chapters. The other problem is that just around the corner was the scene that I'd been looking forward to since the beginning of this book, getting to this huge culmination piece. It wasn't the climax, but this was another big story beat where the stakes were going to go ping, and I was really looking forward to this. And I just had to get a couple of chapters, maybe 5 chapters, to get from the last time I raised the stakes to the big scene. And I think what happened was I lost steam because nothing I was writing was comparing to this, the awesome that was coming. And that took the wind out of my sails. I did it to myself. So first of all, taking breaks was a great thing for me to do. When I wasn't feeling it, I stepped back, and that's good. It's healthy, it's good, and I don't want to put words on the page when I'm not feeling it, because again, those words will translate onto the page as boring and not exciting and not feeling, you know. The other thing I did was I shared the problem chapters, just those 4, maybe 5 chapters, with an alpha reader, with a couple of alpha readers actually, to basically say, look, no context, I'm not going to give you my whole manuscript. Here's just 5 chapters of the middle of my book. Let me know if it hooks you, if this hooks you, if you're feeling it, if you're interested in this. You've got no other context about what's going on other than the main character is a vampire, I'll give you that, and she's in Ireland. That's all I'm giving you. And my alpha readers came back and said, this is good, I want to know more. I want to know what happened beforehand. I want to know what happens next. So my strategy of writing in fits and starts was kind of working, because I was only writing when I was in that zone. So that was good. But the other thing I did, which really, really saved me, was I started teasing 3rd act reveals in these middle chapters. This was huge. And honestly, you should be doing this stuff anyway, and I kind of did before, but I seeded it again in these other little moments. Not so much that I'm hitting you over the head with stuff, but enough to reinforce things. This was kind of the balancing act, right? To reinforce the payoff that would come in Act 3 without really giving away too much stuff. So to be subtle, but to drop hints at the same time. So imagine it this way. If we all know the Chekhov's gun scenario, right? If you introduce a gun, if you show a gun in the 1st act, it gets fired in the 3rd. Well, I would add to that, remind the reader about the gun in the 2nd act. Maybe show it again. Maybe have someone just mention it in conversation. That is huge, because how many times have you read a book where something's mentioned in the 1st act and then it hits in the 3rd, and then it doesn't have the impact that it probably should because you'd forgotten about it, and you're like, oh yeah, that thing. You definitely want to tease it a little bit more and strengthen that promise for your reader so it hits in the 3rd act, and then they go, oh yes, I was expecting that, you know, or of course, you know. The payoff will be stronger. So I looked for opportunities like that, where I could tease something, perhaps something I hadn't teased before, that was going to be paid off in the 3rd act. So when it hits, the reader would be like, oh, yes, right? That added a lot of flavor and feels to those middle chapters. That was huge for me. Being able to insert those little bits was a big deal. So I highly recommend that. Peppering some yummy, tasty teases in those sagging middle chapters, you'll find that they won't sag as much anymore, because now you're getting a taste of the things to come, the exciting stuff that you're looking forward to writing, and the big payoffs. And sort of the last thing I would recommend is find some story beats that work for you. Depending on your genre, you can research, you know, the average story beats of a romance or a mystery. These things they're not hard-coded, but they're great guidelines to follow. So that about wraps it up. Sagging middle. Write when you're excited to write. Write when you're in the zone. And getting in the zone can be tough. Reread what you'd already written and try to pepper in some elements of promise for things to come, to make things not just interesting for the reader when they're reading, but for you when you're writing. Get yourself excited about, oh yeah, this is coming, you know, and tap, tap, tap. Because you know that feeling. Give yourself that feeling and put it in your book as a reward for the things that are going to come. So yeah, there you have it. Sagging middle. It's a pain in the ass, but you can get through it. Trust me. So, if you like this video, please give it a like. And as always, please subscribe. I post Most Thursdays, I try to, and you can follow me on social media. I'm all over the place these days. The links are in the description. I'm fairly active on Facebook and Threads and Blue Sky these days, for sure. And if you haven't, check out The Unlife of Lisa Cooper. That is the first book in the Lisa Cooper series, a vampire urban fantasy. And check out the prequel, The Vampires of 1863, which follows the adventures of Lisa Cooper again, but in 1863 when she's only a vampire of 3 years old. She's not very good at being a vampire. And the stumbling that she does creates some pretty exciting and deadly conflicts as she finds her way in the vampire society of Boston in the 19th century. All right. So thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.